My name is Camille. I'm 30 years old, and last week my father called me with his voice completely breaking. It was the first time in my life I had ever heard him sound like that. 2 years ago, I was the one calling my parents, barely able to speak, right after hearing a stage 3 breast diagnosis. And my dad said one sentence I will never forget. 6 months of treatment, 36 trips to the medical center, not one visit from my family. They were too busy preparing for my brother's wedding. Now my father needs me, and my answer was exactly 4 words. Before I go on, if this story speaks to you, please take a second to like and subscribe. But only if you truly feel connected to it. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now let me take you back 2 years, to the day my doctor's office called. At the time, I was working as a senior graphic designer at a mid-sized agency in Boston. It was one of those trendy offices with exposed brick walls, too many plants, and an espresso machine that probably cost more than my first car. I loved my job, and I was good at it. I had worked my way up from intern to senior designer in 5 years, with no shortcuts and no one opening doors for me. My apartment was a small 1-bedroom in Somerville. Nothing impressive, but it was mine. I had a monstera plant on the windowsill that I had somehow kept alive for 3 years, which honestly felt like a personal achievement. My life had a rhythm. Coffee at 6:30, gym 3 times a week, dinner with my friend Harper every Thursday. That Wednesday started like any other. I was buried in a campaign for a major client, some fintech startup with a deadline so tight it made my eye twitch. My laptop was open, Slack was going off every 30 seconds, and then my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. I was in the zone, that rare creative flow where everything finally starts clicking. But something made me answer. "Miss Atwood, this is Dr. Patterson's office. We have your biopsy results." I still remember the exact temperature of my coffee, lukewarm because I had forgotten about it for over an hour. I remember the afternoon light hitting the glass wall of the conference room, and I remember thinking, results like this shouldn't come with that tone of voice. "The results are back," the nurse said. "Dr. Patterson would like you to come in tomorrow morning. Can you be here at 8 a.m.? My Starbucks cup sat untouched for the rest of the day. That night, I couldn't taste my dinner. I just kept replaying one thought over and over. They don't ask you to come in for good news. The next morning, Dr. Patterson didn't waste time. She told me it was stage 3. Her voice was gentle, but professional. The condition was aggressive and treatment needed to begin immediately. I sat in that sterile office, surrounded by framed diplomas and an artificial peace lily, and I felt like I had somehow floated out of my own body, like I was watching myself from the ceiling. There I was, a woman still in the blazer she had put on for work that morning, hearing words that sounded like they belonged to someone else's life. "Ms. Atwood? Camille?" I blinked. "Sorry. Yes, I'm here. Do you have someone who can drive you home?" I thought about calling Harper, but it was barely 9 a.m., and she had a shift at the hospital. My coworkers were friendly, but they weren't really my people. And then, without thinking, I said, "I'll call my dad." Here's what you need to understand about my family. My father, Richard Atwood, was the kind of man who believed his opinion was final, not in a loud, dramatic way. It was quieter than that. He had this immovable confidence that made everyone around him rearrange themselves to fit his decisions. Growing up, we didn't argue with Dad. We didn't challenge Dad. We simply did what Dad said. And still, after everything, after years of feeling like I came second, I reached for him in that moment. Because that's what daughters do, right? When your world starts to fall apart, you call your father. I walked out of the oncologist's office, found a bench in the hallway, and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to tap his contact. The phone rang twice. Then he picked up. "Camille, what is it?" "I'm in the middle of something." I should pause here and explain the Atwood family hierarchy. My brother Derek is 2 years younger than me, but you would never know it from the way our parents treated us. Derek was the son. I was background noise. Derek went to Boston College fully paid for, not because he earned some major scholarship, but because Dad wrote the check without hesitation. When it was my turn, I was told that girls didn't need expensive degrees. So I took out $87,000 in student loans and went to a state school. When Derek got his first job, Dad threw a party. When I got promoted to senior designer, my mother texted me a thumbs-up emoji, and at that time, Derek had just gotten engaged to Megan, a perfectly pleasant woman with perfectly highlighted hair and a perfectly safe job in HR. The wedding was scheduled for October, only 4 months away, and by then, it had taken over my family completely. Every conversation somehow became about the wedding. Every dinner turned into a planning meeting. My mother had a Pinterest board with 847 pins, and apparently every single one of them mattered more than me. "Dad," I said into the phone, my voice breaking. "I just left the doctor. I have a serious diagnosis. Stage 3. Silence. I waited. I could hear him breathing. Somewhere in the background, my mother asked who was on the phone. "Dad, did you hear me?" Still nothing. Still. Then he said something I will remember for the rest of my life. "We're going to need to talk about this later." But the way he said later made it clear he didn't mean later that day. He meant not now, not this week, not while Derek's wedding still needed attention. Around that time, I started taking screenshots of our text messages. Back then, I told myself it was just so I wouldn't forget things. Treatment fog is real, and I was terrified of losing track of important details. But maybe some part of me already understood that one day I would need proof. "Dad," I said again, slower this time, as if maybe the words hadn't reached him. "The doctor said it's stage 3. I need to start treatment right away. I'm really scared." By then, I was crying in the hallway of the medical center. A nurse walked past and gave me a soft, sympathetic look. I turned toward the wall and pressed the phone tighter against my ear, waiting for my father to say the words every daughter hopes to hear. "Come home. We'll handle this together. You're not alone." But that isn't what he said. There was silence for 5 seconds, then 10. Finally, he exhaled. "Camille, listen. Your mother and I can't handle this right now." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. "Your brother is planning his wedding. Do you understand that? The wedding is in 4 months, and there's still so much to do. We can't take this on right now." "Dad." "You're a strong girl," he said. "You've always been independent. You'll figure it out." His voice changed then, becoming firm in that familiar way that meant the conversation was already over. "I have to go. Derek and Megan are coming over to finalize the venue deposit." Then the line went silent. I sat on that bench for 45 minutes. Doctors passed by, nurses, patients, families holding folders, bags, coffee cups, each other's hands. No one stopped. To everyone else, I was just another woman sitting in a hallway. But inside, my life had just split into 2 parts. Before that call and after it. I wanted to call him back. I wanted to ask how a one-day celebration could matter more than his daughter's entire future. I wanted to say that flowers, dresses, and deposits could wait. But I didn't say anything. I just took a screenshot of the call log. 8:47 a.m. Duration, 2 minutes and 31 seconds. Then I saved it in a folder called Family. That was the last time I called my father for 2 years. On my first day of treatment, I drove myself to the medical center. The infusion unit was on the 4th floor. It was a large room filled with reclining chairs arranged in a half circle, each one beside an IV stand, each one with a small television attached to a movable arm. It looked like a spa designed by someone who had only heard about spas from a medical textbook. I checked in, signed the forms, and was assigned to chair 7. My nurse was named Rita. She was kind, with reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain around her neck. She prepared my port, checked the line, and started the drip. "First time?" she asked gently. I nodded. "It's okay to be nervous, honey," she said. "Most people bring someone with them." I looked around the room. She was right. In chair 3, a woman's husband held her hand through the entire session, leaning close and whispering things that still managed to make her smile. In chair 5, a teenage boy sat beside his mother while she read aloud from Harry Potter. In chair 9, an older man had a daughter who brought him homemade soup in a thermos. And in chair 7, there was me. Just me. I texted my mother. "Starting treatment today. I'm scared." She replied 6 hours later, after I was already home, curled up on my bathroom floor, overwhelmed by side effects I had not been ready for. "Hang in there, sweetie. I'm at the florist with Megan picking centerpieces. Peonies or roses? What do you think? I stared at the message for a long time. Then I screenshotted it, added it to the folder, and typed back, "Roses are nice." I didn't tell her I had spent the past hour on the bathroom floor. I didn't tell her I had to pull over twice on the way home because my vision kept blurring. I didn't tell her any of the real parts. What would have been the point? I met Harper Sullivan during my third treatment session. She was a nurse practitioner who ran a support group for patients going through long-term treatment, one of those hospital programs that probably existed because someone had written a grant proposal using words like wellness, resilience, and emotional support. I had ignored the flyers for 2 weeks. Then Harper approached me herself. "You're always alone," she said, sitting down in the empty chair beside mine. She had curly red hair pulled back into a practical ponytail and the kind of direct eye contact that made lying feel almost impossible. "I notice things like that," she added. I forced a small smile. "I'm fine." "I didn't ask if you were fine." Harper smiled, but not in a pitying way. It was warm, steady. "I asked why you're always alone. Big difference." I should have brushed her off. I should have given her one of those polite, empty answers people use when they don't want to be seen too clearly. But I was 3 rounds into treatment. My hair had started thinning, my body felt like it belonged to someone else, and I hadn't had a real conversation with anyone in weeks. "My family is busy," I said. Then, because something about Harper made honesty feel safe, I added, "with my brother's wedding." Her expression stayed calm, but something flashed behind her eyes. Maybe recognition, maybe anger on my behalf. "When's the wedding?" she asked. "October." "And when is your last treatment session scheduled?" "November." She nodded slowly. "You know," she said, "this hospital keeps visitor logs. Every patient, every visit, who came and when. It's mostly for security, but some people request copies later, for their records, for their memories." At the time, I didn't understand why she was telling me that, but I remembered it, and 3 days later, I requested my first copy. Derek's wedding was scheduled for October 15th. I was between treatment cycles then, in that small window where I felt almost like myself again. The nausea had faded, and the exhaustion hadn't fully taken over yet. I hadn't planned to go. I hadn't been asked to be in the wedding party. Not as a bridesmaid, not as a reader, not even as someone lighting a candle in the background. But a part of me still thought maybe I'd show up, sit quietly in the back, see my family, pretend, for one afternoon, that things weren't as broken as they felt. Then my father called, one of his rare calls. "Camille, about the wedding," he began. "Your mother and I have been talking." For 1 second, hope rose in my chest. Stupid, stubborn hope. "We think it's best if you don't attend." And just like that, it disappeared. "You understand," he continued, like he was explaining something very simple to a child. "You look unwell. You've lost weight. Your hair?" He cleared his throat. "It's Derek's special day. We don't want anything to overshadow it." Anything meant me. Overshadow meant reminding people that his daughter was going through the hardest season of her life while they celebrated flowers, seating charts, and champagne. "I understand," I said. And I did. I understood exactly what kind of family I had. The wedding happened without me. I saw the photos on Facebook. My mother's post got 247 likes while I lay in bed recovering from my 4th round of treatment. There was my father in his Brooks Brothers suit, smiling like he didn't have a care in the world. There was my mother in champagne silk, wiping happy tears from her eyes. There were Derek and Megan, golden and glowing, surrounded by 150 guests who had no idea the groom's sister had been quietly erased from the day. The caption read, "The happiest day of our family's life." I took a screenshot and added it to the folder. Then I closed Facebook and didn't open it again for 6 months. Some things don't need to be seen twice. 3 weeks after the wedding, the medical bills started arriving. My insurance covered a lot. Thank goodness for my company's PPO plan. But a lot is not the same as everything. After deductibles, co-pays, and medications my plan didn't fully cover, I was looking at $47,000. $47,000 I did not have. I sold my car. I canceled every subscription. I stopped buying anything at the grocery store that wasn't on sale. And when that still wasn't enough, I did something I had promised myself I would never do again. I asked my father for help. "Dad, I'm in trouble. The medical bills are more than I can handle. Could I borrow some money? I'll pay it back. I stared at that message for 20 minutes before sending it. My finger hovered over the button like it might set off an explosion, but I was desperate, and desperation has a way of making pride feel very small. His reply came 2 hours later. Your mother and I just finished paying for Derek's wedding. We don't have extra right now. Have you looked into a personal loan? Your credit should be good enough. I read it 3 times, waiting for another message. Maybe a sorry. Maybe an I wish we could help. Maybe even an I love you. Nothing came. $47,000. That was the price of keeping my future possible. And my family, the same family that had just spent $80,000 on my brother's wedding, a number Derek had proudly shared with relatives, couldn't offer me even a little help. I took a screenshot. I added it to the folder. Then I applied for a personal loan with a 14% interest rate because I had no other choice. I'd be paying it off for years. But at least I'd be here to pay it. At least I hoped I would. The worst night came after round 4. My oncologist had warned me that each cycle could build on the last, that my body might feel more drained every time. But nothing prepares you for lying on your bathroom floor at 2 a.m., shaking so badly your teeth chatter, while your body feels like it is turning against you. That was the night I lost my hair. Not slowly, the way it had been happening before. Not a few strands here and there. All at once. I woke up and my pillow was covered in blonde hair, the hair I'd had my entire life, the hair my mother used to braid when I was little. I crawled to the bathroom and got sick until there was nothing left in me, then my body kept trying anyway. At 2:47 a.m., I called my mother. The phone rang 8 times, voicemail. I called again, voicemail, again, voicemail. At 3:15 a.m., I texted Harper, I think I need help. She showed up at my apartment 40 minutes later, still wearing her scrubs from a late shift. She didn't make a speech. She didn't ask 100 questions. She just sat with me on the bathroom floor, held back what was left of my hair, and stayed there until the sun came up. My mother called back at 10:23 a.m. Sweetie, you called last night. I had my phone on silent. Megan and I were at the spa. Post-wedding stress relief, you know how it is? There was a pause. What did you need? I looked at Harper, who was making tea in my tiny kitchen. Then I looked at the patchy reflection of myself in the bathroom mirror. Nothing, Mom, I said. It was nothing. Oh, good. Well, call any time. Love you. She hung up before I could answer. I took a screenshot of the call log. And finally, I understood what family really meant. I know some of you watching may have been through something like this, being left on your own by the people who were supposed to stand beside you when you needed them most. If that hit close to home, write "me too" in the comments. You're not alone. And if you're wondering what happened when my father finally needed me, stay with me, because the next part is something I never saw coming. But first, let me tell you how I made it through. 2 years later, I was clear. The day Dr. Patterson looked at me and said, "No evidence of disease, Camille. You did it." I walked out of her office and cried in the parking garage for an hour. They weren't sad tears. They weren't even happy tears. They were something else entirely. Release. 2 years of holding my breath, waiting for the next appointment, the next result, the next impossible bill, the next moment I had to be strong when I had nothing left. And finally, I could breathe again. A lot had changed in those 2 years. I had been promoted to art director. Apparently, when you come face to face with how fragile life can be, you stop wasting time on office politics. You speak clearly. You make decisions faster. You stop being afraid of disappointing people who were never going to choose you anyway. Corporate America calls that leadership. My boss, Victor Reeves, had kept my position open through treatment. He let me work from home on the days I could manage it, and he never once made me feel like I was a problem to solve. When I thanked him, he only shrugged. "You're talented," he said. "Talent is worth waiting for." I had moved, too. I sold my little apartment in Somerville and bought a condo in Beacon Hill. It wasn't huge, but it had a window that looked out toward the Charles River, and there was enough sunlight for my monstera plant, the same one that had somehow survived everything I had. For my first year clear, I bought myself a navy cashmere scarf. It was the most expensive thing I had ever owned that wasn't attached to a medical invoice. Harper and I were still close. Closer than close, really. We still had dinner every Thursday, just like before. Only now, she didn't feel like a friend. She felt like the sister I should have had all along. As for my family, I hadn't seen them in 2 years. We exchanged the bare minimum: a Happy New Year text, a birthday emoji, maybe a short message on a holiday. Nothing real, nothing warm, nothing that mattered. And I had made peace with that. Or maybe not peace exactly, more like a fragile truce. I had a life now, a good life, a life I had built with my own 2 hands, from the wreckage they left me in. And then my father called. It was a Thursday evening. I was making dinner, salmon with roasted vegetables, because during treatment I had learned how to actually cook. Back then, I needed to control what went into my body. Later, it became a habit. My phone lit up on the counter. Dad. I stared at the screen. The salmon hissed in the pan. The phone kept buzzing. My first instinct was to let it go to voicemail, the way I had learned to let so many things go. But something made me answer. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the small, stubborn part of me that still wanted to believe people could change. Hello? Camille. His voice sounded different. Thin, careful, almost uncertain. And my father had never sounded uncertain a day in his life. I need to see you. Not, how are you? Not, it's been too long. Not, I'm sorry for disappearing when you needed me. Just, I need. What's going on, Dad? There was a long pause. In the background, I could hear my mother's muffled voice asking something I couldn't make out. I've been given a diagnosis, he said. Another pause. Parkinson's disease. Early stage, they say, but... His voice trailed off. I stood in my kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear, waiting for him to continue. The salmon was beginning to burn. I didn't move. I need my family around me right now, he finally said. There's a dinner Sunday at the house. Your mother, Derek, and Megan will be there. I want you there too. We need to discuss the future. The future. As if I hadn't spent 2 years building one without him. Okay, I heard myself say. I'll be there. After we hung up, one thing became painfully clear. In the first real conversation we had shared in 2 years, he never once asked if I was okay. He didn't even know if I was still in recovery. For the next 2 days, I moved between dread and a strange, dark curiosity. Parkinson's disease. I looked it up, because that's what I do now. I research. I prepare. I don't walk into storms without checking the sky first. Early-stage Parkinson's isn't an immediate ending. It's a slow change, a gradual loss of control, tremors, stiffness. Eventually, difficulty moving, speaking, and doing simple things without help. It requires long-term care. It requires patience. It requires someone willing to put their own life on pause. And suddenly, I understood why my father had called. Not because he missed me, not because regret had finally found him, because he needed something. And in his mind, I was the obvious choice. The daughter without a husband. The daughter without children. The daughter who had always been expected to give things up quietly. I called Harper that night. "You're going?" she asked, her voice gentle but guarded. "I need to know what they want," I said, "and I need them to look me in the eye when they ask for it. Cam, I'm not going to let them twist this around. Not anymore." I reached for the cashmere scarf hanging by my door, running my fingers over the soft fabric. My reminder, my proof that I had made it through something they never even showed up for. "But I need to face them," I said. "Does that make sense?" Harper was quiet for a moment. "Then bring the folder." I knew exactly which one she meant. "The screenshots?" I asked. "The visitor logs?" "Yes," she said, "not to use as a weapon, just to remind yourself of the truth if they try to rewrite it." I hadn't opened that folder in months, but that night I sat on my bed and scrolled through 2 years of evidence. The texts, the call logs. The hospital visitor records with my name at the top and an empty space where visitors should have been. My family's version of love, documented line by line. Sunday came too quickly. I dressed carefully, not to impress them, but to protect myself. Black slacks, a cream silk blouse, the navy cashmere scarf draped over my shoulders. I looked successful. I looked healthy. I looked like someone who had survived and rebuilt without asking their permission. Harper texted me before I left. "Remember, you don't owe them anything, not a single thing." The drive to Newton took 40 minutes. My parents' house looked exactly the same. A white colonial with black shutters. 3 stories, 5 bedrooms. A lawn so perfect it barely looked real. The house I grew up in but never really belonged to. The house where I learned that love could come with terms and conditions. I sat in my car for 5 minutes, watching warm light spill from the dining room windows. I could see figures moving inside. My mother was probably setting the table with the good china, the Waterford crystal, the sterling flatware, all the little props that made our family look perfect from the outside. My phone buzzed. Harper again. "You've got this. You survived treatment. You can survive dinner." She was right. I had faced down the hardest chapter of my life. What was one family dinner compared to that? I grabbed my purse. Inside was my phone, and on that phone was the folder that held everything. Then I walked up the brick path to the front door. The doorbell rang the same 3 notes it had played my entire life. My mother answered. Her face was arranged into an expression I couldn't quite read. Joy, relief, guilt. Maybe all 3. "Camille." She pulled me into a hug before I could react. She smelled like Chanel No. 5, the same perfume she had worn to my high school graduation, to Derek's wedding, to every important family moment that somehow never seemed to center around me. "You look wonderful," she said. Come in. Come in." I stepped inside and braced myself. The dining room hadn't changed in 2 years, or maybe 20. The mahogany table that seated 12, even though there were only 5 of us. The crystal chandelier my grandmother had supposedly brought over from Ireland, at least according to family legend, and the photos on the wall, arranged in perfect chronological order. Except they stopped almost completely around my 18th birthday. I noticed the photo wall in a way I never had before. There was Derek's college graduation, Derek's engagement party, Derek's wedding. And then there was me, frozen at 18, awkward in a prom dress, smiling at a camera that had never really been looking for me. "Camille." Derek stood from his seat, the golden boy as always, walking toward me with his arms open. Behind him, Megan stayed seated, one hand resting gently on her stomach. She was 5 months pregnant, or so I'd heard through family gossip. The next generation of Atwood favoritism was already on the way. "Derek." I accepted his hug, but my body stayed stiff. He felt broader than I remembered, softer too, the softness of a man who had never had to fight very hard for anything. "You look great," he said, "really great." His eyes flicked briefly to my hair, finally grown back, though still shorter than it used to be. At least he had enough sense not to mention it. And then I saw my father. He was sitting at the head of the table, in the same chair he had always claimed as his own. But now, something was different. He looked smaller, older. His left hand trembled slightly against the white tablecloth. He was trying to hide it, but he couldn't. And when his eyes met mine, I saw something I had never seen in my father before. Fear. "Sit down, Camille," he said. His voice still carried command, but the edges were worn thin. "We have a lot to discuss." I took the seat across from Derek, keeping my back straight. My purse rested on the floor beside me. Inside it, my phone waited. The evidence was there. I just didn't know yet whether I would need it. My mother served dinner. Rack of lamb, roasted potatoes, green beans, almondine, the same meal she made whenever she wanted the family to look important, polished, and in control. We ate in near silence. Only the scrape of silverware against china filled the room where conversation should have been. When the plates were cleared, my father stood, or tried to. For a second, his legs seemed to hesitate beneath him. He gripped the edge of the table before forcing himself upright. "I'll get right to it," he said. That familiar authority was still there, the voice of a man who had spent 62 years expecting everyone to adjust around him. "You all know about my diagnosis. It's early stage, but it will progress. The doctors say I'll need long-term assistance." He let the words settle over the table. My mother looked down at her hands. Derek shifted in his chair. Megan gently rubbed her stomach. "We've discussed it as a family," my father continued. "As a family." I almost laughed. When had this discussion happened? Because apparently, as a family, still meant without me. "And we believe the best arrangement is for someone to move back home and help with my care." Then his eyes landed on me. "Camille, you're the obvious choice." The word hit harder than it should have. Obvious. Not loved, not trusted, not chosen. Obvious. The spare daughter, the one without a husband, without children, without anything they considered important enough to protect her time. "You mostly work from home, don't you?" he continued. "You don't have a family of your own. We've already prepared your old room. It's time you came back and contributed to this family." Contributed. As if I had spent the last 2 years doing nothing. As if I hadn't rebuilt my life while they looked the other way. As if the only value I had was in how useful I could be to them. Derek nodded, though he wouldn't meet my eyes. "It makes sense, Cam. I've got the baby coming. The job. You understand?" I looked at my father's trembling hand, then at his expectant face, and I smiled. "You have a responsibility to this family, Camille," my mother said softly. That was her voice, gentle on the surface, but heavy underneath. The voice she used when she wanted something without having to sound demanding. "Your father needs you." "I've been working 60-hour weeks," Derek added, leaning back in his chair with the confidence of someone who had never been asked to earn his place. "And with the baby coming, Megan's going to need my support. I can't be in 2 places at once." I noticed what he said. Megan was going to need support. Not that he wanted to be present, not that he believed caring for his own child mattered, just that Megan needed him. A convenient reason to step aside. Megan herself said nothing. Her hands stayed on her stomach, but her eyes were fixed on me. There was something in her expression, not exactly sympathy, recognition maybe, like she was watching a scene she had seen before and already knew how it ended. "Think carefully about what you're asking me," I said quietly. "We're not asking," my father said. His voice hardened. "We're telling you what needs to happen. You're the daughter. This is what daughters do." This is what daughters do. The words hovered in the room like smoke. I felt my pulse speed up. For one brief moment I felt that old pressure again. The pressure to obey, to smooth things over, to shrink myself so everyone else could stay comfortable. But that version of me didn't live here anymore. She had vanished on a bathroom floor 2 years earlier, holding a phone full of unanswered calls and messages from people who couldn't be bothered to show up. "Before I answer," I said, my voice steady even though my heart was pounding, "I want to ask you something, Dad." He looked surprised. People didn't ask Richard Atwood questions. They answered his. "When was the last time you asked how I was doing?" Silence. "When was the last time," I continued, "you asked whether I was even okay?" The silence stretched across the table. My mother's smile froze in place. Derek suddenly became very interested in his water glass. Even Megan leaned back slightly, as if she already knew this conversation was about to turn into something no one could control. "What are you talking about?" my father asked, but his voice had lost some of its sharpness. "I'm asking a simple question," I said. "You say I have a responsibility to this family, but when I was sick, really sick, where was this family?" "Camille, that's not—" my mother began. "No," I said calmly. "I want an answer." I kept my voice steady. I had spent 2 years learning how to stay calm when everything inside me wanted to break apart. "Dad, do you even know if I'm still in remission? Do you know what my last scan showed? Do you know anything about my health at all?" Another silence. This one felt sharper than the last. "You're sitting here," he said slowly, "looking perfectly healthy to me." I looked at him. Am I wrong? His expression changed. First confusion. Then something darker started to settle in. "What do you mean, perfectly healthy?" "You knew I had a serious diagnosis," I said. He stared at me. "Dad, I had stage 3 cancer." I let the words sit there. "I went through 6 months of treatment. I lost my hair. I lost 15 pounds. I paid $47,000 out of pocket because when I asked you for help, you told me you couldn't." His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in my entire life, Richard Atwood had nothing to say. And here's the part I need you to understand. I reached for my purse, slowly, deliberately. My hands were not shaking anymore. "I'm clear now. 2 years in remission, but you didn't know that, did you?" I pulled out my phone. "You never asked." My father's face had gone pale. My mother was crying now, but silently, the way she always did when she wanted to look fragile without actually taking responsibility. "That's not fair," she whispered. "We were dealing with the wedding." "The wedding," I repeated, nodding slowly. "Derek's wedding. The wedding important enough to plan every day. Important enough to spend $80,000 on. Yes, I heard Derek telling Aunt Linda. But my treatment wasn't important enough for one visit." I looked around the table. Not once. Not one single time. Derek shifted in his chair. "Cam, we didn't know it was that serious." "I called Dad the day I got the diagnosis," I said. "I was crying. I told him it was stage 3. Then I turned to my father. "And you said, word for word, 'We can't deal with this right now. Your brother is planning his wedding.'" "I didn't," my father started. "Yes," I said. "You did." I unlocked my phone, opened the folder, and placed it face up on the mahogany table. "Would you like to see the messages where you told me you couldn't loan me money for treatment because you had just paid for the wedding? Or the call log from the night I called Mom at 2 a.m. because I was too weak to stand? Or maybe you'd like to see my hospital visitor records?" I scrolled to the document. Rows and rows of dates, times, entries, and one column that repeated the same word again and again. None, none, none. 36 hospital visits, I said. 36 treatment sessions, 0 visitors. The room went completely still. Megan's hand dropped from her stomach. She was staring at the phone, then at Derek, then at my parents. Something in her face had changed. My mother reached toward the phone, then pulled her hand back like she was afraid to touch it. "I didn't," she began. But there was nowhere for the sentence to go. I slid the phone toward the center of the table. The screen glowed under the chandelier light, showing the visitor log I had requested more than once over the last 2 years. Each time, a part of me had hoped the next page would show a familiar name, and each time, it showed the truth. "You can look," I said. "All of you. I'm not hiding anything." My mother was the first to pick it up. Her hands trembled as she scrolled. Months of entries, dates stamped in a cold, official font, my name at the top, and that column. Visitors. None, 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 none. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why didn't you tell us how serious it was?" "I did tell you." I took the phone back and opened the screenshots. "Here, this is where I sent you my treatment schedule, and here's where you replied asking whether roses or peonies looked better for the centerpieces." I swiped again. "Here's where I asked Dad for help with the bills, and he told me to take out a loan." Another swipe. "And here's where I called you 23 times over 6 months, and you answered twice." Derek took the phone from my mother, scrolling through the proof. His face had gone a strange shade of gray. Megan leaned over his shoulder, reading every line, her jaw tight. "This is..." Derek shook his head. "This can't be right." "It's right," I said. I took a slow breath. Every screenshot has a timestamp. Every visitor log came directly from the hospital. This isn't my version of the story, Derek. This is what happened. I looked around the table. This is what all of you did. Then I turned back to my father. He hadn't moved. His trembling hand was pressed flat against the table, like he was trying to steady himself against something much heavier than his diagnosis. "I don't need anyone to apologize," I said quietly. "I just need you to remember this." My voice lowered. "Remember it when you ask me what I'm going to do next. And if you're thinking I was too prepared for this moment, you're right. I was. Because when the people who are supposed to protect you turn away, you learn how to protect yourself. You learn to keep records. You learn that feelings can be denied, but proof cannot. If you believe the truth has a way of speaking louder than any excuse, hit that like button and stay with me, because my 4 words are coming." The silence that followed was louder than any shouting could have been. My mother was crying for real now, not the polished, delicate tears from earlier, but something raw. Her mascara had begun to run, leaving dark lines down her cheeks. "I didn't know," she kept saying. "Camille, I didn't know." "You knew, Mom," I said. "You just chose not to look." Derek was still holding my phone, scrolling through the screenshots like somewhere in that folder there might be a message that made them innocent. There wasn't. My father finally spoke. "This is the past," he said, his voice rough and uneven. "What's done is done. What matters is now. I'm sick, Camille. I need help. We have to move forward." I almost laughed. Almost. Forward? I repeated. You want to move forward? Yes, he said. Whatever happened back then. He waved one trembling hand, as if the hardest chapter of my life had been nothing more than unfortunate timing. We need to focus on what's happening now. I need a caregiver. You're my daughter. Megan cleared her throat. It was the first sound she had made in almost 20 minutes. Richard, she said carefully, her voice calm but tense. Did you know about all of this? The hospital visits? The money she asked for? My father didn't answer. He knew. The words came from Derek, quiet and shaken. He was staring at one of the screenshots, the one where my father told me to take out a loan. Dad, Derek said, his voice low. You knew. It was complicated, my father snapped, and for the first time that evening, his control cracked. The wedding? The timing? There were considerations. Considerations. I stood slowly and smoothed the front of my blouse. There were considerations, I repeated. I picked up my phone and slipped it back into my purse. My mother reached for my hand. Please, Camille, don't do this. We're family. And there it was, the word they always saved for moments when they needed something. Family. Family, I said quietly, letting the word sit between us. Let me tell you what family means, Mom. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Family means showing up. Family means answering the phone at 2 a.m. when someone you love is scared and alone. Family means helping with medical bills instead of spending $80,000 on a party. Family means visiting your daughter in the hospital at least once. My mother's face crumpled. Derek looked down at the floor. I spent 6 months fighting through treatment, I continued. 6 months of IV medication, exhaustion, nausea, hair loss, and fear. And where was my family? I looked at each of them, one by one. Planning seating charts, tasting wedding cakes, choosing flowers. Camille, my father started. No. The word came out sharp and clean. You don't get to say my name like that anymore. I am not your backup plan. I am not the daughter you remember only when you need something. I am not the person you ignore when I'm struggling and call when it's convenient for you. I picked up my purse, adjusted my scarf, and held on to what was left of my peace. You have a son, I said to my father. The son whose wedding you paid $80,000 for. The son you never asked to give up anything. Why don't you ask him to take care of you? Derek's head snapped up. I can't. I have responsibilities. So did I said, meeting his eyes. I had a job. I had a life. I had a serious diagnosis, and I handled all of it alone because every one of you was too busy. I started toward the door, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Behind me, I heard my father's voice break in a way I had never heard before. Camille, please. I stopped. I'm begging you. I turned around. My father was crying. I had never seen him cry before. Not once in 30 years. Not at funerals. Not during emergencies. Not in any moment where emotion might have made him look less in control. But now tears were running down his face, and his shaking hand tried to wipe them away. I'm sorry, he said, choking on the words. I know I handled it wrong. But I'm scared, Camille. I'm scared of what's coming. I need you. Please, you're my daughter. You're my... For one brief, dangerous moment, I felt the old pull. That ache to be loved, to be chosen, to finally be enough. The little girl inside me, the one who had spent her whole life trying to earn her father's approval, lifted her head. But that little girl had grown up. She had survived alone. She had rebuilt a life out of nothing. And she didn't need Richard Atwood's approval anymore. Dad, I said, my voice steady and clear. I hear you, and I understand that you're scared, but there's something I need you to hear too. I stepped closer, close enough for him to see my face, close enough that there would be no confusion. 2 years ago, I called you crying. I told you about my diagnosis. I told you I was terrified, and do you remember what you said to me? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. You said, we can't deal with this right now. I let those words settle over the room. So here's my answer, Dad. I smiled. Not with bitterness. Not with rage. With peace. I can't deal with this. 4 words. The same message he had given me when I needed him most. My mother gasped. Derek's mouth fell open. My father stared at me, tears still on his face, as the full weight of the moment finally reached him. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't run. I walked past the family photos that had quietly erased me, past the chandelier, the polished furniture, and all the expensive little details that made our family look perfect from the outside, past my mother, who reached for me and then let her hand fall when I didn't stop. "Camille," Derek called behind me. "Camille, wait!" I didn't wait. I opened the front door, stepped onto the brick path, and kept walking. The cool evening air touched my face like relief. My car was still in the driveway. Behind me, I heard the door open again. Footsteps hurried onto the path. Then my mother's voice, high and desperate. "Please don't do this. We're your family. We love you." I stopped at my car door and turned back. "Mom," I said gently, "family doesn't leave you alone when you're at your lowest. And love isn't something you only offer when you need something in return." Her face collapsed. For a second I felt something. Not guilt, more like grief. Grief for the mother she could have been, for the relationship we might have had if she had chosen differently. "Goodbye, Mom." I got into my car, started the engine, and adjusted my mirrors. In the rear view I could see them, my mother standing on the path, crying, my father in the doorway, leaning on Derek, and Megan behind them all, one hand on her stomach, watching me leave with an expression I couldn't read. I pulled out of the driveway and onto the tree-lined street, and I didn't look back, not once. The cashmere scarf was soft against my neck, the road ahead was clear, and for the first time in 30 years I felt like I could breathe. I was finally free. 1 week later, my mother called. I answered, not because I owed her anything, but because I was curious. And maybe, just maybe, because some habits take longer to disappear. "Camille?" Her voice sounded tired, older than I remembered. "I wanted you to know what's happening here." "Okay." "Derek has had to take a leave of absence from work." She paused. "Your father's condition is moving faster than they expected. He needs help every day now. Meals, medication reminders, help getting dressed." I listened without saying anything. "Derek is doing it," my mother continued. "He didn't really have a choice. With Megan pregnant, they couldn't afford full-time care, and your father refuses to consider assisted living." Another pause. "Derek missed an important project at work. His supervisor wasn't pleased. There's talk he may not get the promotion he was expecting." I thought about Derek, golden boy Derek, the son who had never been expected to give anything up, the son whose $80,000 wedding had been paid for while I took out loans just to get through treatment, the son who had sat at that dining table and nodded when our father tried to push me into giving up my life for him. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. And I meant it. Not exactly for Derek, more for the situation, for the painful moment when expectation finally crashes into reality. "Megan is stressed," my mother said. "She didn't sign up for this. They're arguing all the time. She says—" My mother stopped herself. "She says what?" A long sigh. "She says she's starting to understand why you left." I let that settle. Megan, the quiet observer at the table, was beginning to see the pattern. "Thanks for telling me, Mom. Will you—" Her voice softened. "Will you come back and help?" "No," I said, "but I hope Derek figures it out." Then I ended the call. 3 weeks after that dinner, my mother sent me a text, just one message, but it was unlike anything she had ever sent me before. "Camille, I've been thinking a lot. I owe you an apology, a real one, not an excuse. I should have protected you when you were sick. I should have stood up to your father. I should have been there. I wasn't, and I have to live with that. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know that I see it now. I see what we did, and I'm sorry." I read it 3 times. This was new. My mother had never taken direct responsibility for anything in her life. She lived in the passive voice. Things happened. Situations became difficult. Mistakes were made. But now, here she was saying it plainly. "I should have. I wasn't. I'm sorry." I didn't answer right away. I sat with her message for 2 days, turning it over in my mind like a stone in my palm. On the 3rd day, I wrote back. "I appreciate you saying that. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I hear you." Her reply came almost immediately. "That's okay, whenever you're ready, or never. Whatever you need." Whatever you need. 4 words. So different from the 4 words I had been given 2 years earlier. I showed the messages to Harper over dinner that Thursday. She read them carefully, then looked up at me. "How do you feel?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe a little hopeful, but cautious. Very cautious." "That's healthy." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You don't owe her forgiveness, Cam, but you are allowed to accept an apology." "I know," I said, with a small smile. "I'm learning." The letter arrived 2 weeks later. It was handwritten, shaky, uneven, the handwriting of a man whose hands were no longer fully listening to him. My name was written on the envelope in careful, trembling letters, Camille Atwood. I almost didn't open it. I carried it around in my purse for 3 days, taking it out, looking at it, and putting it back again. Finally, Harper said, "Just read it. The anticipation is probably worse than whatever is inside." She was right. I opened it on a Thursday evening, sitting alone in my apartment with a glass of wine and my monstera plant as the only witness. "Dear Camille, I am not good at this, not at apologizing, not at admitting when I was wrong. Your mother says it's pride. Maybe she's right. I failed you, not because I didn't understand, but because I made a choice. I chose your brother's happiness over your survival, and I will carry that for the rest of my life. I am not asking you to come back. I am not asking you to forgive me. I know I don't deserve either one. I only wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. I see the daughter I pushed away, and I see the woman she became without me. You are stronger than I ever was. I lost you not because of Parkinson's, but because I was not the father you needed. I'm sorry. Those words are not enough, but they are all I have. Your father, if you still allow me that title, Richard." The writing wavered across the page, each letter its own small battle against the tremor that would eventually take more from him. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. I didn't write back, but I didn't throw it away either. Harper came over the next day. I showed her the letter first, because she was the one person I trusted enough to sit with me through something that complicated. She read it slowly, her expression thoughtful. When she finished, she set it down on the coffee table between us. "How do you feel?" "I don't know." I curled my feet beneath me on the couch. "Sad, I think. Sad for him. Sad for what he's losing. Sad for what we might have had." I paused and searched myself for the familiar weight I had carried most of my life. But not guilty. I thought about it again. Really thought about it. No, not guilty. I picked up my wine glass and turned it slowly in my hands. I used to feel guilty about everything, for not being good enough, for not trying hard enough, for not becoming the daughter he wanted. But I've learned something in the last 2 years. What's that? That some people will never love you the way you need, no matter how much you give. And that isn't your failure. It's theirs. I looked down at the glass in my hands. You can't keep pouring yourself out for someone who has no intention of holding what you give them. Harper smiled, her eyes shining. That's pretty wise. I learned it the hard way. I took a sip of wine. I'm not going to rush forgiveness. Maybe I'll get there one day, maybe I won't. But I'm not going to force it just because he's sick, or because it would make things easier for everyone else. "And if he gets worse?" Harper asked softly. "If he—" She didn't finish. "Then I'll deal with that when it happens," I said. "But I will not destroy myself to make someone else comfortable. Not anymore." I looked at the letter still resting on the table. "That's my boundary, and I'm allowed to have it." "Yes," Harper said, "you absolutely are." 6 months later, I was still clear. At my last checkup, Dr. Patterson used the word thriving, which felt almost too hopeful for someone like me, someone who had spent years bracing for impact. But maybe she was right. Maybe I was thriving. I was promoted again. Creative director. This time, I had an office with a window overlooking the Boston skyline. My monstera came with me, of course, and in the better light, it grew bigger than ever. Somehow that plant had become a quiet symbol of my life. Damaged, moved around, tested again, and still growing. I hired 2 junior designers, and to my surprise, I discovered that I loved mentoring people. I loved helping them navigate the same kind of pressure and uncertainty I had once faced alone. Maybe because I knew what it felt like to have no one guiding you. Maybe because I wanted to be the kind of person I had needed when I was starting out. I was dating someone too. His name was James. He was a high school history teacher with kind eyes and the worst sense of humor I had ever heard. Truly terrible jokes. The kind that made you groan before you laughed. He knew about my illness. He knew about my family. He knew about the ways I had been hurt and the ways I had put myself back together. And the thing I loved most was that he never tried to fix me. He simply showed up. Again and again. Quietly. Consistently. Gently. The way people who love you are supposed to. Harper and I still had dinner every Thursday. She had started dating someone too. A surgeon from her hospital named Elena, who somehow found every one of Harper's bad jokes funny. I didn't understand it, but I loved that for them. Little by little, we were building something real. Not the family we were born into, the family we chose. My mother still texted me every few weeks. Short messages, mostly. Thinking of you. Hope you're doing well. I saw this and thought of you. Sometimes I answered. Sometimes I didn't. We weren't close. Maybe we never would be, but we were something. A work in progress, maybe. My father's condition continued to progress. Eventually, he agreed to a part-time caregiver, paid for from the retirement fund he had spent years refusing to touch. Derek started visiting twice a week. Out of duty, I assumed, not love. But maybe, for some families, duty is the closest thing they know how to offer. I hadn't seen any of them since that dinner. I didn't know if I ever would again. And for the first time in my life, I was okay with not knowing. If you're still watching, if you've made it this far, I want to speak to you directly. Maybe you are where I was 2 years ago. Maybe you're sitting in a waiting room, standing in a hallway, or crying somewhere no one can see you because the people who were supposed to love you have made it painfully clear that you are not their priority. Maybe you're wondering if it's your fault. Maybe you keep thinking that if you were easier, quieter, stronger, more useful, less needy, then maybe they would finally show up. I spent 28 years believing that. Then life pushed me into the hardest chapter I had ever faced, and I learned the truth. Some people will not show up no matter what you do. You can be going through the most frightening season of your life, and they will still find something else that matters more to them, and that is not proof that you are hard to love. It is proof that they do not know how to love properly. So here is what I want you to remember. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to say no to people who only remember you when they need something. You are allowed to stop answering the phone. You are allowed to leave the table. You are allowed to build a family from the people who actually show up, even if they do not share your last name or your bloodline. Forgiveness is not a performance. It is not something you owe people because they finally feel sorry. It is not something you have to rush because it would make everyone else more comfortable. Healing happens on your timeline, and if forgiveness never comes, that is your choice too. No one gets to decide how you recover from what they did to you. Those 4 words I said to my father on "I can't deal with this" were not about revenge. They were a mirror. I gave him back the same message he once gave me, and for the first time, he had to feel the weight of it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not scream. It is not argue. It is not beg someone to understand. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is tell the truth and walk away, and sometimes the truth is what finally sets you free. I'm sitting in a coffee shop as I finish telling this story. My favorite one, the place with the good lattes and the big windows looking out onto the street. It's a Thursday afternoon. Harper will be here in an hour for our weekly dinner. My phone is in my pocket, and inside it there is still a folder called Family. The screenshots are still there, the call logs, the visitor records, the proof from the hardest time of my life. I don't look at that folder much anymore, but I keep it. Not because I want to live in the past, because sometimes you need a reminder that what happened really happened. Outside, the city keeps moving, people walking, cars passing, life going on, and now I am part of it again. Not watching from the sidelines, not trying to earn a place in a family that never made room for me, not shrinking myself so other people can stay comfortable. I am living, really living. 4 words changed everything. Not because they were clever, not because they were cruel, not because they gave me some dramatic victory, but because they were true. My name is Camille. I'm 30 years old. I survived the chapter that was supposed to break me, and I learned something I wish I had understood much sooner. Family is not just blood. Family is who shows up when life gets heavy. Family is who answers, who stays, who remembers, who does not make you beg for basic care. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who only love you when it benefits them. Thank you for listening, and please, take care of yourself. I truly mean that. If this story stayed with you, these are the lessons I carry with me every day. First, you do not owe your sacrifice to people who disappeared when you needed them. Second, keeping records is not always about revenge. Sometimes it is about protecting your truth when someone tries to rewrite the past. Third, boundaries are not selfish. Boundaries are self-respect. And if you are still here, thank you. That means more than you know. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one, and leave a comment. Have you ever had to set a boundary with family? What happened? If you want another story, check the description. There is one waiting for you there. Until next time, take care of yourself.